everybody, and welcome to another episode of Intuitive Insights. I have a wonderful guest today. She is an author and holistic health coach. Her name is Alegra Loewenstein, and she's here to tell us about her books on emotional eating. Hi, Alegra. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
My pleasure. You've got some good stuff, so we all got to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great starting place for the conversation because we do have to eat. And yet sometimes we approach food in a way where we're almost trying to quit it completely, it seems, and it will never work. We have to eat. We will always have to eat. There's very few things that we can do with joy and pleasure and never get tired of them 3 times a day for the rest of our life. But eating is on that list. It's a very short list. I don't even know what else is on there, but
yeah, eating is right up there because without it, you really wouldn't be alive for very long.
Yeah, might be the only thing on that list. And so I never want to demonize food or make food a terrible thing, or for the most part, I don't even say to cut foods out, because a lot of times that is exactly the attitude that backfires on us, where we say, I'm going to, well, I know for me, my personal journey was sugar, and I would go, I'm going to quit eating sugar. I'm going to cut it out completely. And I would literally go 2 or 3 days and I would be binging on sugar again. And it's because we set ourselves up for failure when we try to cut out entire things. And of course, there are certain exceptions to that rule. True food allergies are obviously an exception. We can get into it, but it's a complicated subject. Food intolerance is, may or may not be in that category as well. Mm-hmm. It's not a really well understood topic. It's starting to be understood as a real thing. Mm-hmm. It's not really defined in science and medicine yet.
Really?
Food intolerance is not. Food allergy is very clearly understood. It is an immune response. So it can be tested, it can be understood, and if you have a true food allergy, you want to eliminate it. But no, the food intolerance realm is there's not a consensus yet. Okay. And so you get people saying, "Oh yeah, I can tell you when we do this blood test," and there's some truth behind it. There's certain markers that can indicate it, but it's not as clear as a food allergy. So it's just a little more one-on-one, and what you need to do to deal with that is very different. I mean, I have had a client who, before our time together, she had cut out eggs, cut out peanut butter, cut out dairy, been vegetarian, been vegan, cut out gluten. She did all these things. She had IBS and she had extra weight. And then she finally just came around and said, oh, all of my problems went away when I started eating everything, but I just stopped overeating.
And so it's like it was an emotional response, to where she felt like she was overeating, or okay, I got you. Wow.
And all of those things that she had cut out because she thought she was allergic or intolerant, it was actually driving. She got into that mode where food wasn't fun. Food was terrible, and food was suffering, and food was bad, and food was, and it's like the list that she tried was so long, and she was intolerant to overeating, right? And so sometimes we just don't know what's going on, and it takes sometimes taking a step back to figure that out,
and finding someone like yourself to help us to understand what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I do. That's what health coaches do. I've hired health coaches in the past, not for emotional eating, but I was having headaches for a while, and you think, oh, a headache, you're going to be able to figure that out, but it's not always
that simple.
Yeah, it's not simple. It's not always caused by what we think it is. I
Mm-hmm.
kept thinking I was dehydrated, and it actually ended up being a totally different thing. It was kind of about sleep, but it was really even about um, just me having really bad boundaries, honestly.
Okay.
and,
And
and
that's how
and
you got started becoming a health coach?
that was actually already after I was a health coach.
Okay.
Um, I just realized sometimes we're blinded. We can't see the forest for the trees, right? So I know a ridiculous amount about health, but when you're in the thick of it, sometimes you need help to figure it out. And so, yeah, absolutely. That's what I do with people for food, for weight loss, for emotional eating.
Okay.
And I know that's my personal journey as well. Emotional eating was something that I overcame many years ago. In addition to just my general training and knowledge about nutrition, they come together
Okay.
to.
Did you lose weight on your journey? Or was that something that you had issues with?
I'm a naturally lean person. I did have extra weight at the time when I was extreme emotional eating, and I felt very bad about it, but I always knew that it wasn't really about the weight. I always knew that it was about sugar, honestly, for me. Um, I knew, but I was stuck. I knew it was about sugar, but I was stuck in that pattern of making food my enemy, basically. And,
Hmm.
and trying to cut it out and going back and cutting it out, going back and cutting it out. And, it's the yo-yo. So you can yo-yo with weight, but you can just yo-yo with food, right? It's up, down, off, on, you're doing it, you've failed, you're sticking to it, you're falling off the wagon.
Wow.
It's that back and forth approach to food that will never work, right?
Okay.
And that's, to me, the biggest myth that we are told about food, and especially about emotional eating. And to a large extent, the majority of people who overeat are doing it for emotional reasons. I mean, probably all of them. And a lot of that comes from that myth, right? That myth that the way to lose weight and the way to deal with this is to make this part of your diet evil or bad, or cut it out. And that will always backfire, because we're not crazy, but in our minds we have a lot of different personalities, right? We have our adult self, we have our inner child, we have our perfect woman who's always criticizing us, we have our judge, we have our personal cheerleaders, we have our mean girls, like there's all these different components to us. So as soon as we say, and this is at the heart of what I do, as soon as we say to ourselves, I'm going to cut this out, or I'm going to eat 700 calories a day, or even I'm going to go to the gym for an hour every single day and take this class with this hardcore instructor, which, that's great for some people, but if it's not your thing, it's not going to last.
Yeah.
As soon as you tell yourself you have to do it, there's another part of your brain that's like, I don't want to do that.
That doesn't sound like any fun whatsoever.
And so inside your mind, you don't even realize it, but you're already fighting with yourself. And when you're fighting with yourself, you lose.
Yeah. Wow.
You lose. Nobody else loses, just you. And so, yeah, that idea, that extremism, it all fits together, right? That extremism, that it's deprivation. It's the deprivation mindset, right? It's the can't have it, don't deserve it, must suffer to get this goal.
Where do you think that comes from? Where does that mindset stem from?
Man, if I really knew that, I would be a bazillionaire. But, I think it comes from all over, honestly. I think it's society at large. I mean, you can apply the deprivation mindset to anything, right? That's, people talk about money, right? Or lack mindset with money. So, it's society at large. But with food, it definitely comes from the diet industry, right?
Mm,
It's a pretty modern phenomenon.
okay.
Dieting, people didn't really diet. You know, our grandparents, they didn't really diet. It just didn't exist. They just ate food and
Yeah, but it was real food back then too. There weren't as many processed foods. That's, I think, the misconception where people are getting very confused. You want to cut it out, but is it actually food? I think if we focus on food itself, a lot less issues, don't you think?
yeah, and that in itself is a lot of what I do. I call it the easiest, hardest thing. So yes, and there's an author who I love, Michael Pollan. His books are amazing. He's actually a professor of journalism, and he writes about food and food politics. And he he has food rules that he came up with, and the first one, well, there's three. It's eat food, mostly plants, not too much. Right, that's it. That's like, he says that in the first paragraph of his book, and then he's like, now I'm going to spend the next 400 pages explaining it to you. And so, you know, that's great advice, and that's advice that I can give to my clients. And my work is helping people do that, because it is simple, but it's not always, because food is not food. You know, 70% probably of the grocery store is processed food. It's not ingredients. It's not what our grandparents ate.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two, eating more plants and eating not too much food. Well, that's all complicated, because that's all wrapped up in the emotional thing, in what we started out about, that we're so attached to, oh, well, I like to eat my, you know, gummy bears and cheese puffs and potato chips and whatever it is. You know, I like that. And so we get attached to it. And then they're like, well, I have to cut that out if I'm going to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
But I really try to focus on baby steps and never eliminating completely, right? Because whatever, like, you want to eat gummy bears once in a while, that doesn't matter. But when you're eating gummy bears every single day, at the end of the day, because you're actually not coping with your stress, and like me with my headaches, you don't have good boundaries, or whatever it is, you know, it becomes a crutch, it becomes a problem. But then that's where the attachment comes from. Oh, well, I can't give that up.
Mm-hmm.
That's helping me, right? And it's not even always conscious. It's not even always that we can articulate it that way. But that feeling, that other part of our brain is like, no, I can't give up the gummy bears. And then we're in the battle mode again, right? It's like, you must give up the gummy bears. No, I can't give up the gummy bears. You must give up, you know. And you're going to lose, and you're going to try to give them up 100% instead of 75%. And then you're going to fail, and then you're going to binge, because then you're going to feel like, well, now I failed. What's the point? And so again, we're coming at it from that overly extreme, overly deprived position, and we're setting ourselves up to fight with our own brain, and we're setting ourselves up to fail. And so I do something totally different.
Okay.
And I actually have some notes that I can share.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Feel free.
I have them over here. So is that frontwards or backwards?
Oh, no, it's perfect. 5 simple steps to stop cravings.
Okay, perfect. Sometimes I don't know if it's showing up as the reverse image.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, so I'm gonna start with number one, because number one is kind of the awareness step, and obviously you start with number one. But number two is gonna get into that mindset thing. Okay, so the first
recognize your triggers.
Just recognize your triggers, and you know, you put on your scientist hat, and I tell people, like, just get a piece of paper. I always say, I don't care. You can get the receipt out of the bottom of your purse. It doesn't matter. Write it down. You know, at the end of the day, be like, oh, well, when did I stuff my face full of gummy bears? When did I, you know, when could I not stop eating those pieces of pizza, even as I was telling myself to eat pizza, right? Because even the triggers happen in different ways. Sometimes we're just going for it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're trying to eat a sort of normal amount and we can't stop. But when did that happen? When did you overeat or eat a food that you didn't want to be eating? So first you just write it down, and you've got to let go of the judgment. That's, of course, a practice in itself. But I always say, like, put on the observer hat, the scientist hat, and just be like, okay, this is just data. I'm just going to write it down. When did this happen? When did this happen today, yesterday? Do it for a few days or a week. And then this is the really good part.
Acknowledge the pros and the cons.
Yeah. And the deprivation mindset, it's so easy to focus on the cons. It's so easy to be like, I'm overweight. And I mean, honestly, we go too far where I've always been a journaler, and my journal from 10, 15 years ago, it's like, I'm disgusting. I feel so sick. My stomach is so fat. Like, we are so mean to ourselves. And I have it written down. I have written proof.
Yeah.
But it's happening in our heads. So that's easy, right? The cons are easy. Like, it's making me gain weight. It makes me bloated. It makes me feel tired an hour later. It's bad for my teeth. It's just bad for my health. It's not health providing food. Okay, so that's usually not a problem, but we really, really, really have to write down the pros. And people think it's nuts, but it's so true. Okay, this is also part of that, like, letting go of the demonization of it, of, I'm a terrible person and I eat this terrible thing. It's like, no, you actually were helping yourself in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably time to let go of that habit, because it's turning into something that long-term is not certain. If you're gaining weight, long-term, this habit needs to change. But short-term, there was a benefit. And you can recognize, and you can even appreciate that benefit. And you can be like, oh, well, actually, I was really stressed at the end of the day, and it felt really good to eat all those gummy bears. I felt bad afterwards, so put that on the con list. But there is a pro, I like gummy bears. They taste good to me. It doesn't matter, gummy bears, whatever, like cookies, ice cream, pizza.
The act of chewing can be very relaxing.
Yeah.
And we learn that as babies with the little suckers. You start off and it's a soothing act. You don't necessarily need a bottle, but you need something to soothe you. And it's ingrained in us, I think, in that respect. Because I found that with my own habits as well. I would get stressed at work. Something crunchy. I need to eat something to not focus on what else is going on, and maybe even to not say something that I probably shouldn't be saying.
Yeah, so you are creating a boundary for yourself by plugging it up.
I like that, yeah.
Right, which is a habit that needs to change long term, but there is that short term benefit. And actually, I want to get through a couple more of these tips, but the things that we turn to actually have emotional meanings as well. So just really quickly, the crunchy stuff usually tends to be an anger or a frustration reaction, because it's like, get it out up here in my mouth.
Ah, very interesting.
Some of the different types of food and flavors of food that we're going for can see different things that, the emotional things that might be happening.
Okay.
And so then the next step, and this is really where you get into the action, is create alternatives.
Create alternatives, okay.
And this is not, just because you make a list of alternatives doesn't mean that every time that you go for that snack food, you're just gonna do this alternative instead, right? These are rituals. These are parts of our life that are making us whole and human. And so it's a slow process of replacing, like, I have this ritual that is helping me, but it's also hurting me.
Yeah.
And so we're going to sort of unwind that one as we create and weave new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes patience and persistence and forgiveness, because they're still probably going to go for that bag of potato chips or whatever on occasion. But every time that you replace it, or that you maybe do something proactively, right? Like maybe you create a better boundary at work because you're actually eating this because you're kind of pissed off at somebody and you want to, you know, with your words or with your fists.
Definitely.
Unwinding, and honestly, it is, you're rewiring your brain. And it's like a pathway or a muscle. You know, you don't go to the gym one time and get ripped and lose 30 pounds. Just like you didn't gain 30 pounds by eating gummy bears or potato chips one time, right? You did it over and over and over. So it's a replacing, it's a training. It's like, you work the muscles, practice, build them up, and or a pathway in our brain. It is literally a neural pathway. It's like, well, you don't go bushwhacking one time and all of a sudden there's a well-worn trail there. You're maybe like, oh, well, this is the regular path, but I think there's like a little coyote trail over here. I'm going to try that one today. And then you're like, yeah, okay, I did that. Well, I'm going to hunt that path out again. And I'm going to try that one again.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the main one is overgrown and is not used. And then the new one is the new one. And at that point, these habits are easy, right? So that's the goal. So we don't want to do it as like, this is horrible and I'm torturing myself.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't even want to succeed because I've made
it'll never last.
Because I've made myself miserable by cutting every food that I love out of my diet.
Yeah. No.
But instead I'm moving my body for the joy of moving it. I'm moving my body because the endorphins feel really good. I'm like eating this fresh fruit because I have all this energy in the afternoon versus the sugar crash from when I used to binge on gummy bears. Like you start to recognize the pros and the cons of the new choice, and it's like I said, it's a ritual. It's a ritual of your day that over time that just becomes a new ritual. And at that point, it's easy. Yeah, you might still eat the gummy bears, but at that point, it doesn't matter. You're like, oh, whatever. I stuffed myself on those potato chips, and now I kind of feel like crap, and I don't think I'm going to do that next time.
Definitely. And you also write about this as well. You've written a couple of books on the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my first guided journal. It's called Emotional Eating Detox, a 21-day inspirational journal to understand your cravings, end overeating, and find freedom from dieting forever. And if you go to my website, alegraloewenstein.com, there's free support videos, because I know you might be thinking, 21 days, I can't do that for 21 days. And it's okay. You know, you're going to take a break. You're going to miss journaling for a few days, a week, whatever. Like, there's a video for that.
Okay.
You just pick it back up and you move on. And this dives into a lot of those things, like you mentioned about just being from a baby, we have this need. Well, here's day 3. What did my parents say about food or eating in childhood? How did we eat? And what message do I still hold on to from my childhood? Because it starts as a baby, and then we get the messages from our family too. And it's not out of ill intent. They love us and they want us to be happy, you know, hopefully for the most part, that's true. And they have their own issues, right? So they're like, oh, you're sad. Let's go get ice cream. We'll cheer you up. Oh, you did really well on that test. Let's go get ice cream and celebrate, right? We use food because it's so available in a way that we can't. And let's talk about our grandparents again. They could actually do that because, you know, maybe not our grandparents, maybe our great-grandparents. They didn't go to the ice cream shop, right? Most of them were living on the farm. They made ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
They had to buy their rock salt and, you know, or maybe get a block of ice delivered to their door for a special occasion.
Yeah. And their days were so difficult and so long anyway. Yeah. So I think it can be difficult to be overweight in an environment where there's no chips, there's no candy, there's not all that stuff unless there's a special occasion, and you're working from sun up until sundown. Very physical work for both men and women.
And you work for 3 days at least, or weeks, for the celebrations too, right? Like they feasted, they did Thanksgiving, they did all that stuff. But
Yeah.
my great grandmother, I remember, I mean, the food just wasn't available. She got an orange in her stocking every year for Christmas.
Yeah, I've heard that before a lot from a lot of people that just got an orange. Yeah.
It's not a citrus country, and it was a big deal to get an orange in the middle of the winter.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that.
You know, there wasn't refrigerated trucks bringing oranges to refrigerated stores.
Yeah.
Was, you know, a rare and very special occasion.
Sorry, somebody just called me. Okay, sorry about that.
That's how special that it was.
I know, right?
Not an orange.
Yeah. But I hadn't, although I had heard that before, I hadn't made that correlation mentally that it was the time of year. That's what made that orange really so special, you know?
Everything. It was the distance that it came from and the time of year.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't have in the summer in Texas, maybe they're growing berries, or you can grow apples and grapes in Texas too, but you can't really grow citrus at any time of year. And you don't have any fruit in the winter.
Yeah.
You know, most of Texas is pretty cold.
Yeah, I didn't grow up here. I've only been here for a couple years. Really? Is it that important? Someone just needs me today. I forgot to turn this off. Sorry about that. And I mean, for years I've heard that people will get an orange, and it seems so far out of where I came from, you know, where we got toys. You just didn't get an orange. And not that that is a negative or a bad thing, but I'm realizing really how special that was. Your parents had to probably gone out of their way to get that orange.
Oh yeah, and it probably cost a lot.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I read a book based 100 years ago, and it talks about how the train, they called it like the banana train, and a shipment of bananas would come from the tropics, and they would load it onto a train, and they would sell it at the stations, and it just would go until the bananas were gone. I mean, it was probably carrying passengers too, but
yeah,
everyone from town is like, the banana train, and it would stop for, you know, the length of time that the train stopped at the station, and everyone runs and they buy a few bananas, and like it doesn't come back for months. The banana train.
Wow.
I think it's helpful to remember that, because what we think of as the history of our own life, right? Like the norm for our life is that all this food is available. It's really easy to overuse it, and you know, too much. Because it's so easy to do, then we try to demonize it, and then even the advertising industry is really quite new. I mean, I think it's like
and it's very subliminal. People don't realize how subliminal that is. You've already eaten your dinner, and you sit down to get comfortable and turn on that TV, and you have that commercial, and then you don't understand why you're hungry. Well, as a hypnotist, I'm telling you, it's not coincidence. They are hypnotizing you. That's what their advertising is there to do, to make you want to go out and buy that product.
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, we kind of can bring this back to the beginning of our conversation. You have the food manufacturers on one side saying, oh, you know, like your noise, eat our food, it will make you happy, it will fix your life. And then on the other side, it's like, go on a diet, you know, buy this protein shake and stop eating real food and you will fix your life. And it's like, of course we fight with ourselves.
It's the ultimate fat shaming as well. When in society, all we've had are examples, and knowing what I know now and learning what I'm learning now, that some of the models that have been put before us as women were actually men. And we can't have that body. It's not going to happen. So then you have this entire generation as a result of being fat shamed when we're attempting to be held to these standards that are not womanly. It's just not ever going to happen.
Well, and it's all fake too, right? I mean, everything
Yes.
is photoshopped. So
Oh yeah.
no matter what they started out like, what we even see isn't real. So
Yeah, but we didn't know that, and our parents certainly didn't know that. And there was a lot. I know there was a lot of fat shaming going on when I was growing up.
yeah, and I feel like it's so sad because, you know, for the most part, that is actually also coming out of a place of wanting the best for you. You know, I still need it to this day. Parents so worried about what their kids are eating. You know, that's not true. Parents so worried that their child is gaining weight. They're not eating real food. They're not, they're not modeling great behaviors around food.
Mm-hmm.
And as a young, preteen, I see parents starting to restrict what their children are eating, what these young girls are eating.
Yeah.
And they're doing it because they want to help, and yet they're making the problem so much worse.
Yes, 100%.
I'll use that as a quick segue that if that part of this conversation is resonating with you, then this is my other journal that's currently available. It's the Body Wisdom Journal. And this one is a bit more of a journey of healing our body esteem, because it sadly is so damaged. And honestly, it doesn't even matter what you look like. And it doesn't even matter whether you're thin or heavy or anything in between. Our media is so perverse that I think that every woman struggles with this, and you can be a model and struggle with this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So this is a healing journal on that regard, and it also delves into a little bit of that tuning in of like, one, we want to heal our body esteem, which helps us heal our self-esteem, and two, we want to be able to tune into our body so that we can start this journey, right? Like, okay, so this one's like foundational work, understanding what the problem even is. And then this is almost like second step of, how do I tune into my body? How do I actually even, everyone's like, oh, just listen to your body, right? I mean, people in my industry say that. I say that. It's like, well, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that.
But
that's what this journal
is. For Cheetos.
Right. Yeah, my body wants Cheetos. My body wants gummy bears and potato chips.
Yeah.
Okay, so this, like, taking that moment, again, building those rituals into our day that become really meaningful over time. These are such simple practices. It's 5 minutes a day.
Okay.
If you really want to be over ambitious, because most of my clients are, 10 minutes.
10 whole minutes. Yeah, I think you deserve 10 minutes to be good.
And don't freak out. This one says 40 days to heal and listen to your body's intuition. It's okay. You can take a break. You can put it down. Tons of my friends are like, oh, I can't wait to do that. It sits on their bedside table for like 6 months. And I'm like, have you done it yet? And then finally they're like, okay, yeah, I did it. It's awesome. It's normal. It's totally normal to be like, yeah, I want to buy that book. That's awesome. I love that journal. And then it like sits there and you're like, oh, I'm scared. I don't want to open. I have to look at what's really happening in my body and my mind. It's terrifying. And then you start to do it and you're like, oh, okay, that's all right.
So we're almost about out of time. So what words of wisdom would you give girl, woman, mother, older woman? You put on a lot of weight. What would you say? Where should she start?
I think I'm just going to go back to those really 3 simple steps that I shared, which is start by recognizing your triggers, which is just observing, when is this happening and where is this happening, without judgment. And then diving deeper, right? And this can be like a 3-day activity.
And the pros and the cons.
Yeah, so the first day, just make note, when is this happening and where is this happening? Sometimes like it only happens at work. It happens it's happening at the end of the day. It's also a biology timing thing. There's a few factors for that, but just make note, when and where is this happening? Okay, day 1. Day 2, pros and cons, right? So don't just demonize, really try to dig deep and Make a pro list, make a con list, make a pro of like all the things that feel good about it, and make a con of all the things that feel bad about it. And they can be, you know, all of the pros will be short term and all the cons will be maybe longer term. And then start brainstorming, right? Like, again, this is just, you can be in a really creative, like a playful mindset to this. Because ultimately what we want to do, I guess the real heart of advice is like, just give up the guilt and the shame and the judgment. And that's a 3-step process to do it. You know, write it down, acknowledge the pros and cons, and start coming up with alternatives.
That's wonderful. And if somebody wanted to hire you for your health coaching services, how would they do that?
Yeah, so they can get a hold of me at my website, alegraloewenstein.com. I have a couple of different levels of service. And they can, you know, email me, you can reach out. I'm totally here to help guide and make sure that you're getting the right choice for you. And of course, my books and my journals as well. You can get those on my website, and these 2 are available right now. And I actually have 2 more coming out. I have a Kitchen Magic. It's simple recipes and rituals to manifest health and happiness. And I have, that kind of goes in conjunction with that, Food Journal Magic, which is perfect for the new year, which is right around the corner. It's a new approach to food journaling, which is you're not counting calories or points or carbs. Like, you're not counting anything, but instead you're really measuring, how does this make me feel, and how, you know, how is this working for me? How is what I'm eating actually working for me in a food journal format, which people are familiar with. So I think it's a nice and easy segue into the weird world of emotions.
Oh, wow. Well, we have to deal with them. We are emotional creatures, emotional beings, and this is a wonderful step in the area of bodily awareness, because you are on a spiritual journey. This is what awareness is. This is what your consciousness is. You are becoming aware of yourself in a body, and that body does need maintenance and it does need care, but it also needs love and it needs understanding as well.
I love that. Yeah. And your body is your friend.
Yeah.
Your body really is here to help you, and your body is talking to you.
Yeah. And if you got negative stuff going on, you are not alone in the world. We've all dealt with it, and it's mostly from society. Turn off your TV sets. Okay, Alegra, thank you so very, very much for being with us today. And you can find her books available on Amazon.com.
With free Prime shipping.
Oh, it's free Prime shipping. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Intuitive Insights. We'll catch you guys next week.